Hey folks, David Stewart here. Let's talk a little bit about pushing your limits or pushing the limit. Every year I like to do at least one little piece of content for National Novel Writing Month to get people in the right headspace. If you're not aware of what that is, it's, just a very unorganized movement and attempt to write a 50,000 word manuscript in the month of November. So 50,000 words has the potential to be a complete book or a significant contribution towards a complete book. And if you were to divide up all the days, that comes out to about 16, 17, or 1,800 words a day, which is not that much if you're an experienced writer, but most of the people attempting National Novel Writing Month are not super experienced fiction writers. So for them, that 50,000 word manuscript in 1 month really is a kind of sprint. And I talk about sprints or writing sprints in my book here, Keys to Prolific Creativity, which you can get for, I think, $2.99 for the ebook and maybe $8 or your regional equivalent for the paperback, because I know that not everybody is going to do the way that I generally recommend people set up their creative process, which is to work every day. If your process is happening every single day, eventually the results happen. Sprints are another way to try to accomplish that, which is you try to do lots of work in a short amount of time. Now, I want to put this in the context of pushing your limits, because for a lot of people, doing a sprint or focusing really hard on trying to do a large volume of writing or any kind of creative work for a certain amount of time may be very challenging, because it's going to be pushing your limits for how much focus you have in a given day, how much work you can tolerate, how much you can put to the side in order to prioritize whatever work you're trying to do. All that stuff has a kind of limit to it, and you have personal limits that have to be expanded or those boundaries pushed. And so the analogy I like to use, I like to take it back to the physical, because I notice that a lot of people who are very proficient with their physical arrangement of their body and the disciplines that go on there sometimes have difficulty applying some of these same lessons to creative or intellectual work. So the analogy that I really want to use, I guess, is like weightlifting or bodybuilding. If you are lifting weights, you are generally always trying to push a boundary. And that's how you get bigger and stronger, is you try to lift more weights, which means you are pushing your limits. The typical way that people would get bigger and stronger is called progressive overload. You try to do a little bit more weight or a little bit more volume of the same weight every single time you work out, as long as you can persist in doing that to continue getting bigger and stronger and bigger and stronger. That's how you build a physique, or it's how you get stronger as an athlete. It's basically through progressive overload. So every single day that you go into the gym, you are trying to overload your muscles, and your body will have an anti-fragile response to that stimulus of, I can't lift any more weight, by strengthening your muscle fibers, making bigger muscle fibers and adding new muscle fibers so that you get stronger. The same thing happens when you're dealing with, say, your ability to focus on mental tasks or your ability to do creative work. It's kind of like a muscle that you flex, and every single day you're going to be pushing limits if you're trying to be as productive as possible. And eventually, just like weightlifting, you get to plateaus where you're not really going to get more efficient or better at what you're doing without, some kind of other kind of significant change. But it is a lot like stepping in the gym. And indeed, the problem with pushing your limits is a lot of times you're not completely sure of where your limits actually are, because you haven't sat down and tried to write really consistently. If you're maybe writing a book for the first time, you're not aware of how much focus you have, or how much focus you should have, or what kind of things you can do to try to improve your focus. You're not experienced enough to engage with that intellectual work to know exactly how to improve yourself with it. And the main way that you're going to improve yourself is just by trying to do it. Just like how if you really want to get stronger, the main thing you need to do is lift weights. And even if you're doing a lot of different things wrong, as long as you're consistently trying to do it, you're probably going to get stronger. But there are going to be limits. So whenever you are pushing your limits, there is like risk involved that you could actually harm yourself. So if you're trying to push your limit for like how little you can sleep, that can actually have deleterious health effects. Likewise, if you're pushing your limits for how much weight you can lift, that has the risk of injury. And in fact, the only times that I've ever like really injured myself lifting weights was when I was pushing limits, when I was trying to do more than I could reasonably do. So one of them was actually a volume kind of limit. So when I was a teenager and I was like first working out, it was all about arms. I thought you got to work out arms as often as possible. So I was doing like bicep curls and tricep stuff every single day to try to get the arms bigger. And what did I end up with? Well, I got tendonitis in my elbows and an overuse injury, basically in that little tendon that's in your bicep here that runs from the head of your bicep in. I got this really like bad inflammation and it hurt, and I couldn't like straighten my arm out. Like I could only keep it kind of half flexed if I wanted it to be more not in pain, I guess. So that was an overuse injury that I got from trying to do too much volume. And I also actually like tore a fascia on one of my lower abdominal muscles. I actually thought it was a hernia when I first did it, trying to deadlift, do a max deadlift, trying to deadlift more weight than I had done. I don't remember what it was, but I remember I yanked the weight up off the ground. I did the rep, and I felt this like pain, and I thought I gave myself a hernia. So I dropped the weight, left the gym, got in, saw the doctor. He's like, actually, this isn't a hernia. This is, you tore this part of your fascia, which can happen. It's kind of in the same sort of area where you might get a hernia, but you don't have, your intestines have not like gone through. So you don't have a herniated piece of intestine. So you're okay with that. You just got to like not do whatever you were doing there and let that heal. And it may actually look weird, like for a long time, because you have a torn fascia, so that like the muscle doesn't fit in this little casing quite right in that one tiny area. So in both those cases, I was pushing my limits really more than what I didn't know what I was doing necessarily. So in the deadlift case, I just didn't know like what my practical limits for deadlift were. I felt real strong with deadlifts. I thought I would jump up to a higher weight, and that's probably not the best way to do it, because what happens if you jump up to a weight you can't handle? Well, you don't, maybe your form breaks down a little bit, and those muscles that are you're putting extra weight on muscles that are not used to that load, and that's where the injury tends to happen. So most people don't like tear their hamstrings doing deadlifts. They like hurt some spinal erector, get a hernia or something like that, which kind of seems appropriate when you think about it. Now, transfer that lesson back over to the intellectual space. If you're pushing yourself to write a whole lot of words every single day, and you're like really prioritizing work, like, I'm going to write 3,000 words a day or something, and you're not sleeping or whatever it is, and you're not used to doing that amount of work, you may find that you're unable to actually do the work. Like the more sleep deprived you get, the harder it is to do the work. And what you actually probably need to do is start with that progressive overload mentality, which is the first day that you're working, you need to have a fairly low goal in mind and try to get a higher goal as you go. So say I'm going to work for an hour and I'm hoping to get like 500 words done. And for most people that maybe are new, that's fairly reasonable. It may take you a little bit longer if you haven't done a lot of writing before that, but 500 words. Say I'm going to try to get these 500 words done in this work time, and you may find like, well, I can definitely work this extra hour, and you don't get the 500 words done in the second hour because your focus starts to wane. Remember, focus is like a muscle, and you have to practice using it. So you say, I'm going to write 500 words a day for the first couple of days. I'm going to move it up to 1,000. I'm going to move it up to 1,500, move it up to 2,000, and then maybe by the end of the month, I can do 2,500 words a day. 2,500 words a day. That's basically what Stephen King wrote throughout most of his career. He very consistently wrote 2,500 words a day. And boy, he published a lot of books writing 2,500 words a day. So that can really get you a lot of output. Now, it's not like pulp speed, like what Maxwell Grant or someone would do back in like the 30s, right? Like 10, 20,000 words a day. But you could theoretically build up to that if you had the time during the day to write, and you had the discipline to continue practicing and getting better and better at your focus when you're working. Another thing I noticed, if we just continue the parallels with bodybuilding, is that a lot of people when they are fairly new to working out, will start to consider using performance-enhancing drugs because they start to slow down. Like you don't get the same results in the gym that you got the first month you started working out. And so a lot of people tend to hop on the sauce before they've even really given themselves an opportunity to push their real limits in the absence of performance-enhancing drugs. And so a lot of times you see guys that are on gear and they really don't look like they're on steroids. They look like a guy who works out. They don't really look like some jacked bodybuilder, but they are using performance-enhancing drugs. And in some cases, because their body doesn't respond to those drugs, but in other cases, it's just they haven't really ever pushed their limits as a natty to know exactly what is possible with enhancement or things like that. And I generally come to that conclusion because I see these guys at the gym and they tend to goof off a lot, right? They're not working out that hard. They're not pushing their limits at the gym. They're just kind of thinking that moving the weights around and maybe, doing like a cycle here or there is gonna get them big. And in some cases it works and does the job. In other cases, it's just not a great set of output. So we take that and we move it over back into the creative, intellectual space. And I see a big trend on the internet of people trying to mix different kinds of, quote, nootropics, which are most often stimulants when you get down to like the bare bones. The most powerful ones are going to be various forms of stimulants, or in some cases like anti-Alzheimer's drugs that are you're trying to repurpose for some sort of cognitive enhancement. But the drugs that have the biggest cognitive enhancement in general are going to be stimulants. The more powerful, generally, the better focus you're going to have. A lot of creative guys use cocaine, and it wasn't just because it made them feel good. It really can pump up the focus of when you're working. Same thing if you're just drinking coffee. So you start to jump onto the train of like, I got to use drugs to try to increase my creative output. I got to use drugs to try to up my intellectual output. I got to use drugs to try to grind harder and focus harder on my boring work. And what probably needs to happen is you need to take a more progressive approach to your focus and your ability to do that work, which is to start at a lower level and then slowly try to build up your ability to focus on that kind of work until you're able to do a pretty high volume, high output volume of work. And then you are probably not going to start to think, well, I probably need to like use some nootropics and stay up all night working, and that's how I'm going to make a bunch of money. A lot of people jump on that idea train a little too quickly before they give themselves an opportunity to just figure out how to do the work without any kind of extra help there. Now, I'm being very neutral on that because it's up to you what you want to do with yourself. But in general, I say whether you're looking at your body or you're looking at your mind, give yourself an opportunity to push your real limits progressively. It's going to be safer and better for you before you start trying to look to some sort of substance to fill in the gaps and make it easier for you to do what you're trying to do there. So anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching or listening to this little piece of content. It is National Novel Writing Month, so hopefully you guys will have fun working on a project. I'm actually going to be trying to edit and put out another book. Last book to come out was The Wasting Desert. Put it out last year. Technically, I put it out last year as part of the Krampus Christmas. It's back there, Krampus Christmas collection. But you can get this story, which was in that one, but I put it out in October here as a good little horror fantasy for 99 cents for the ebook, or I think $5 or $4 for the paperback. It's a pretty short little book. Another one of those 2-hour reads if you liked Voices of the Void, so it'll go by pretty quickly. And of course, you can get Keys to Prolific Creativity for $2.99 on Amazon. Thanks so much, guys, and hope you have a great day.